Fox News Podcasts presents the Bret Baier Podcast with Fox News chief political anchor Bret Baier.
On Monday, in a meeting with the NATO Secretary General, President Trump threatened to impose secondary sanctions on Russia, other countries as well, if they do not reach a peace deal with Ukraine within 50 days. In the same meeting, President Trump announced that he had reached a deal with NATO to supply Ukraine with 17 Patriot missile defense batteries, which will be supplied from American stockpiles and paid for by European allies. Before departing for Pittsburgh on Tuesday, President Trump spoke to reporters on the White House lawn.
Well, at the end of 50 days, if we don't have a deal, it's going to be too bad. Well, the tariffs are going to go on and other sanctions go on.
Meanwhile, the Supreme Court has lifted an injunction which blocked the Trump administration efforts to dismantle the Department of Education, allowing the White House to move forward with the firing of more than 1,400 employees who have been on paid leave since June. We'll start there with other topics as well with our panel, Democratic strategist, co-host of The Five, Jessica Tarlov, Fox senior White House correspondent Jacqui Heinrich, and former White House speechwriter, senior fellow at AEI, Marc Thiessen. All right, Jacqui, what's driving the day at the White House and the fallout from really a lot of news elements coming all at once?
It's kind of a kitchen sink day over here, as many are, Bret. You had the inflation report coming out, which showed the first signs that tariff policy might be making its way to consumers' wallets, especially in areas like vehicles, home furnishings, and apparel. Some of the first areas you might see those tariffs take effect. You had him announce a trade deal with Indonesia, which we haven't gotten really a robust readout on, except for what the president told reporters as he was departing the White House at the same time that he was rattling off about this new announcement he made yesterday, arming Ukraine, and putting a 50-day deadline for Putin to reach a peace deal. And then you also had him teeing off on the Democratic mayoral candidate in New York City, Zohran Mamdani, coming as a surprise, I'm sure, to Eric Adams, because the president, who has sort of cozied up to Adams, working across the aisle on things like immigration, voice support for Andrew Cuomo to stay in the race. So that's the day that we are having over here. It's sort of pick your poison. There is something to say about pretty much any topic.
Yeah, so overseas, Marc, how big a deal is this Ukraine change? I mean, obviously it's the European allies picking up the tab, but the president seems more engaged at putting the pinch, at least, on Russia one way or another.
Well, I would quibble about that with the description of it as a change, because I think if you go back 2 years ago, he did an interview with Maria Bartiromo in which he was asked, what would you do if Putin didn't agree to peace? And he said, I'd increase arms to Ukraine. So he's been very consistent that he wanted to end the war peacefully. He gave Putin every chance to do it, more chances, some would say, than Putin deserved. And he's finally come to the conclusion, with the help of his wife, that Putin does not intend to stop fighting, and that the only way he's going to be brought to the table is by force. And so what he's doing is following through on the promises he made. And I think that's one of the things I like about Donald Trump is he's pretty straightforward. He tells you what he's going to do, and then he does it, as the Iranians found out. Yeah,
and so, Jessica, you list the things that they have accomplished, and from their view, they are really significant and got a lot done in the first 6 months and in the weeks since then. Democrats now seem to be focused on the things that are getting the most attention, which is the Epstein list, which we don't fully know what the deal is with that. But when you have the House Minority Leader leading a press conference calling for the Epstein list to be put out, you know that we're in a different space.
We're definitely in a different space. And to Marc's point that when President Trump says he's going to do something that he follows through, that's obviously not the case with the Epstein list, which is why he's angered everyone that supports him, from Charlie Kirk to the rank and file Republicans who came into the MAGA movement because they were interested in this issue and wanted to see him holding powerful people to account, especially for something as, depraved as a potential pedophile ring. So that is what's leading everything. And it seems to me, and granted, I'm not a tremendous supporter of the president's politics, it's overshadowing all of those accomplishments that they feel, rightly so in some cases, that they've, gotten under their belt for the last few weeks. Getting through the reconciliation bill is a huge win for the administration with very, very tight margins. Obviously, the Iranian strike's a big piece of that. And I think that what Democrats are doing is trying to thread the needle. They don't want to miss an opportunity to pile on when it comes. And no partisan would, right? You can't expect that if this was happening in reverse, that the Republicans would just say, I'd just like to talk about Medicaid cuts at this particular moment. But I'm acutely aware of the fact that the Epstein list is not going to win the midterms, and it's certainly not going to win the 2028 general election. And so I want to make sure that we talk about things that are hurting the Republican brand, but also focus on the kitchen table issues. And to Jacqui's point, talking about the inflation report, talking about cost of living, consumer confidence, talking about what the reconciliation bill actually does to the lives of everyday Americans.
Yeah, I mean, Jacqui, the border enforcement stuff, it's historic levels. June, we just got the numbers dropped to the lowest level ever recorded. And, they have a lot to tout. But every day, it seems like oxygen is being filled by some question he's asked and the answer he gives. And then today we had the House Speaker say the Attorney General needs to come forward and explain what the deal is. Seems like the oxygen still seems flowing to that story.
Yeah, I don't think the Epstein story is going anywhere anytime soon, as much as the president would prefer to have that fade into the background. And, side note for 1 second, as much as the Epstein stuff is something that Democrats want to focus on, I just want to point out that the moment that we're in when Joe Biden, he's so far out of the Democratic orbit that instead of letting the Democrats talk about Epstein, he talks about his own auto pen issue, bringing that back into the foreground, which is exactly what this White House would prefer to focus on. That's sort of the story that they pivot to a lot of the time when Epstein comes up. But the Epstein story is not going away, I think, in part because you had the deputy FBI director literally not show up for work on Friday in protest of how this was handled. Even though the president didn't take any questions on that yesterday, I don't think that there's not going to be another opportunity at some point this week. It's the story that keeps rearing its head. It was a bit of a surprise, to your point, Bret, to hear Mike Johnson saying that we should be putting everything out as a party. This is the stuff that we stood for. It would benefit to have the information out there. As you have these conservative influencers, Laura Loomer, for instance, calling for a special counsel to be appointed to investigate the handling of this, it does threaten to fracture the base. And I'm not sure that the president wants to think about that right now. He would prefer that this just fade into the background and that we all talk about the auto pen issue. But you have enough sort of influencers with big megaphones who are concerned about it and want to hear answers on it. And the question does keep cropping up. Yeah.
Marc, just some thoughts about that before we move on.
Well, it's an own goal. So, I mean, Jesse's right. It's not going to affect the midterms. It's not going to affect the presidential race. But it's, Pam Bondi went out and said, I've got the goods on my desk and I've got the client list on my desk. And, there's bombshells.
They made binders.
They made binders, so they raised expectations that there were going to be some great revelations. And then they say, nothing to see here. Trust us. What do they expect to happen? People are going to get upset and people are going to be worried and wondering what's in there. I think, what the simple answer is transparency. Just, go through it, redact the names of the victims, redact anything that's that would be prejudicial in a criminal case or whatever they need to do, and release it. And people will see if it's true. I mean, Bongino said himself that there was no Epstein wasn't killed. So he's seen it. So release it and let people see, and then the whole story will go away.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see how.
Will we see, Bret?
Yeah, well, maybe we'll see.
Panel, we'll hold it right there.
Jessica, with the we've seen all these district court judges step in and say, hold on, you can't do this, you can't do that. The Supreme Court, one by one, seems to be lifting these injunctions, and one of them just to the efforts to dismantle the Department of Education. So they are moving forward. even though they'll still be challenged in different places. The Supreme Court kind of clearing the way for that.
Absolutely. I think the administration has gotten a few pretty big Supreme Court wins in the last few days. The immigration one that came down on Friday, also lifting the nationwide injunction on sending people to third countries, and also not having to, quote unquote, give meaningful notice to someone before they're deported, which means a lot of folks won't necessarily have access to a lawyer before they're shipped out. So I'm sure that's another thing that Trump wishes that he could talk about instead of answering about the Jim Comey, Barack Obama authored Epstein files. In terms of the Department of Education, much to my upset, Democrats have completely fumbled the ball on this issue. We used to lead 10 to 20 points in any given poll, and now it's about even. And sometimes Republicans even have a 1 or 2 point advantage. You can look at the fact that Glenn Youngkin is governor in Virginia as evidence for how the tables have turned. And I think that if the administration would put out some semblance of a plan that isn't just we're going to abolish the Department of Education, but explain to people how the quality of your children's education is going to improve and what approach they're going to be taking, that they would be a lot better off than just saying, we're cutting everybody, we're putting them on leave, and then we'll kind of wait and see as to what the result is.
What's next, Jacqui? What's the next big thing for the White House, you think?
Oh, God, don't ask me that. There's another big thing every hour. I can't give you an answer on that, Bret. Oh, gosh. Big planned thing. Well, we were supposed to hear about a Gaza deal last week. We did get an update from Steve Witkoff and the president yesterday saying that looks maybe potentially like they could get some development later on this week. We have seen this sort of like come to a head and then fall apart multiple times. But the president does seem fixated on his sort of peace agenda. He wants the Nobel Peace Prize, and he is keeping a running list of conflicts that he has ended or prevented, and it's sort of becoming part of his repertoire of what he rattles off facts about himself. It is an issue that is close to his heart, I think, and he wants to see the Russia-Ukraine war come to an end. He wants to see the Gaza ceasefire reached, and I think that's going to be a continuing thread throughout his presidency. Also, the trade stuff. We had some developments yesterday and the day before. The president saying, look, I'm done sending the letters. The deals are as we put them on paper. If you don't come to us with something better than this, you're going to be hit with a rate of XYZ thing. And we are seeing a flurry again of last minute deals. Indonesia, which the president threatened last week, they would get a 32% tariff rate if they didn't reach a deal. The president said today the new agreement is Indonesia pays 19% for access to U.S. markets. The U.S. pays nothing. So I'm not sure we're going to have as many readouts as we did with that big UK ceremony where they announced the very first deal and there was an Oval Office spray and you had the prime minister on the phone talking about what this means for both of the economies. I don't think we're going to see that country by country, but you are seeing countries sort of scramble to get something down on paper before the president loses his patience. And notably today, you had the Canadian Prime Minister, Marc concede that any deal with the U.S. will involve tariffs, which is something that he has not really wanted to admit before. So watching that sort of take shape and hoping if you are, someone who's paying to live and exist in the country, that those deals come together before the tariffs have too much more of an impact on your wallet, as we started to note today with the inflation report.
Yeah, 2.7%. I mean, it's not 9%, Mark, but it's a blip that shows you maybe it's starting to creep in. I do think those deals are going to really be forced, as before they act. I think China is the biggest prize, obviously, and getting a TikTok deal. I think that's all probably coming together in coming days, Mark.
Yeah, there's tantalizing possibilities, but here's the thing: success begets success, right? Momentum begets momentum. So you had obliteration of the Iranian nuclear program, triumphant NATO summit, getting the allies to agree to 5% of GDP on defense, multiple Supreme Court victories, big beautiful bill. couple of new trade deals now going on, arming Ukraine now, and making this push. He's building momentum. And so I think that the possibilities are tantalizing about what the successes could be. It could be an EU trade deal, could be a deal on TikTok, could be a deal with China. Who knows? But when you're on a roll, you tend to keep rolling.
Yeah. Add to that the ceasefire,
and
the rescissions.
Rescissions, yeah, sure. I ran out of room.
Yeah, India, Pakistan. There's all
winning
kinds
so
of stuff.
much, I'm not sick of winning.
I know. Jessica hears it on the 5 a lot, the list.
Familiar with it. Yep.
Yes. All right, guys. Thanks so much. Now for a bit of history. On July 15, 1799, the Rosetta Stone was found by French soldiers in Egypt during Napoleon's military campaign in the region, believed by historians to be inscribed in the year 196 BC. The stone contains a decree in 3 different languages, giving scholars the means to accurately translate the written language of the ancient Egyptians for the first time in modern history. Since 1802, the Rosetta Stone has been housed at the British Museum, where it can still be viewed by visitors today. That'll do it this week. Thanks for tuning in, and you can catch us all the time on the Bret Baier Podcast.
Listen ad-free with a Fox News Podcast Plus subscription on Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Prime members can listen to this show ad-free on the Amazon Music app.